So I'm Nikyla Trask, and this is a little bit about my story. You know, running at 100 like most moms are, always doing something with the kids. Working, I was working on a second degree, pregnant with a third baby, doing ministry with my husband. It was like 16-hour days every day and never any breaks. And eventually, you know, your body just gets enough. And so one day everything just kind of came crashing down for us. And it was after I had my third child. His name's Christopher. I began to become ill after having him, about 4 days after having him. And we thought things would just pass and get better, but it didn't. And eventually I ended up being rushed to the hospital because I had swollen up really large. Like, I couldn't put my pajamas on and that kind of thing. I had just swollen up really big instantly. So we get to the hospital and they say that my heart rate has dropped to 30. They rushed me to ICU. They hooked me up to all these machines. Eventually they kind of figure out that I'm postpartum preeclamptic. I'm sitting and I'm listening every night to a heart monitor. And then as soon as I would try to go to sleep, it would start to ding really loudly and everybody would come rushing in. And I quickly learned that when something's really wrong with you, your hospital room gets full with a lot of people. The fear had kind of set in. And fear is such a real thing. I began to be afraid that I would die anytime I tried to rest, because that's when the alarms would go off in my hospital room. I would barely eat. I was afraid to put anything in my system that would make me feel funny. I was afraid to go out. I went to the hospital every single night, pretty much on a ambulance. I was afraid to go home, to my home. I stayed at my mom's. I had once been this functional, educated, career-driven woman and mom who did everything with her kids. My kids couldn't live with me anymore. They had to go stay somewhere else. My baby would be brought to me in 15-minute increments because that's all I could take before I would go into a massive panic attack. Friends would come over. I have amazing friends and family. They would come, they would lay hands, and we would pray, and we would sing. And it just seemed like we weren't getting any answers, and we weren't getting any relief to the situation. Finally, I honestly believe God sent an angel in the form of a doctor who came and said to me, you know, this is not who you are. You're not crazy. Crazy people don't know that they're crazy. And because you think you're crazy, I know you're not. But we got to get you some help. We got to get you sleeping. She was able to at least get me started on something medically. And my life began to turn around very, very slowly. So it wasn't fast enough. And then one day she came and said, you know, we can't get you to sleep. We're going to have to commit you. Or you're going to have to go home and take this medicine and try to rest. We called our pastor at the time, my husband and I, and we prayed. And I just said, God, you know, I can't live like this anymore, so I got to try this. And I really felt peace in my spirit to try the medicine, and I did. And I slept for the first time in 50-something days for 4 hours. Sometimes it takes medication, sometimes it's counseling, or sometimes it's just setting limitations in your life, whatever it is that works. But within a year, I had gotten off most of the medication that they had placed me on, and I was back leading worship and taking care of my kids, and I was back to work. But even with that deliverance, and it's still a process, there are days when, you know, I have to call an accountability partner and say, hey, I'm struggling today to get up, you know, because maybe I'm feeling a little heavy. Or I have a moment where I feel a little panicked about something, you know, I'm planning a kid's birthday party, or I get overwhelmed with work. Or just surely overwhelmed with, you know, 3 children running around my house making noise. And I might have to call my husband and say, hey, can we pray for a minute? Or, you know, we just need peace in the house. I was constantly worried that the youngest kid, you know, who the pregnancy catapulted all this. So behind that, I wasn't able to be the mom that I always was to the other kids. And I was really worried that he didn't receive the love. He is like the biggest ball of love. His ministry is already developing before our eyes. He always wants to go love on people. And I still believe that just my purpose in his life as a mom, I'm constantly trying to show him, constantly trying to teach him, you know, the way, and show him that my faith in God, even during that time, I think impacts him. It definitely impacts my older two. You know, they believe and they trust God because they were able to see everything go on with me and see me come out on the other side of it. And they attribute that to God. He always provides hope within our struggle. There was never a day that I didn't know that God was able, even if it didn't seem the way I wanted it to or look the way I wanted it to at the time. I knew God was able to do it. I never lost sight in that. There's no struggle that God can't help you overcome. there's nothing too great for him.